hello to everyone and start joining. And we're gonna start the webinar in maybe like 1 or 2 minutes. So we're gonna let people kind of join as they go. We can see the flow of people joining. Yeah, perfect. Attendees are joining. I can see it here. This is great. You are joining the right webinar, just so you know. This is the Lano Exchanges best-in-class benefits for global teams. And we will kick it off in 1 more minute. There you go. We are in the right webinar. For those of you wondering why we're just like staring blankly at the screens, you have joined the Lano Exchanges, and actually it's 2 minutes past 5 p.m. CT here in Europe. For those of you in other places, different times. So we're going to kick it off. So welcome everyone, and thank you so much for joining Lano Exchanges. This is our second edition of this webinar. And today we're going to be talking about offering best-in-class benefits for global teams. I'm really, really excited. The team and myself have worked hard to put a great panel, and I'm really eager to speak with this group today. I really think we've put together great speakers, and I'm excited. Before I introduce myself and I introduce the group, I would like to give a very quick kind of overview, or just give the audience an understanding of why we chose this topic. And I think many of you attending might agree that the pandemic has shifted or changed the hiring landscape dramatically, and the recent economic situation as well. And I think this has really forced a lot of employers to rethink their benefit packages to match the new needs of employees, and especially to accommodate needs of global and remote teams. So we thought that this topic is extremely relevant, and we wanted to give the opportunity to professionals in different areas of this space and working with benefits, that they would give us their perspective. So welcome everyone who's joining today to this Lano Exchanges. And let me kick it off by introducing myself. My name is Andrea Carlon. I'm your moderator today, as you've seen, and I'm the Business Development Director for Lano. We are a global platform for hiring, onboarding, and paying international and global teams. And in my previous life, I was an attorney back in Spain and in the US, and I worked in several fintech companies within always the partnerships realm. Before I address the panel, I just want to share one housekeeping item for everyone that is joining. And we have now a few of you on the other side. You will see on your right-hand side or somewhere in your screen a control panel. You can submit questions using the question feature in the control panel. If we don't have time to answer your question today, we encourage you to reach out directly to the panelists, or to myself, or to anyone in the Lano team to answer this question. We're also going to have 2 polls during the panel, so we make sure that everyone is still there and kind of engaged. So you'll be able to find that somewhere in the feature called poll. And if you need any technical support during the webinar, please contact our colleague Raquel via gotowebinar@lano.io. I think she's going to add it to the chat, hopefully. And yeah, and I think that's all the boring stuff. And now I want to hand it over to our panelists. Thank you so much for being here today. So I would like to invite you guys to introduce yourselves. So maybe we kick it off with Eva, since I see her on the right side of my screen. to introduce herself in perhaps under a minute to our audience. Or yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrea. Yes. Hi, everyone. Very happy to be here. My name is Ava. I'm a psychologist and a psychotherapist, and I'm currently working at Nilo Health. We are a mental health company providing mental health support for employees all over the world. And I'm very much into the topic of workplace mental health and bringing this topic to more people around the world, because I think the past 2 years has shown us that this is not just like something you can discuss on the side, but it's really fundamental to each and every one of us. So I'm very happy to be representing this topic today here.
Excellent, Eva. Thank you so much. Lana, if you don't mind going next.
No, I don't. Thank you, Andrea. Hello, everyone. My name is Lana. I am the head of revenue at SafetyWing. I'm also a Y Combinator founder and an advisor to many different companies, as well as the EU for Innovation. I'm very passionate about remote work. I actually discovered it maybe 10 years ago. I'm a nomad myself and my 2 kids. We travel the world, been to over 80 countries. We go from one place to the other. And what SafetyWing is solving is the problem of bringing your safety net with you, which means health insurance. As I'm based in the US, I can't really bring my health insurance with me as I travel the world. So the idea was, can we build this global social safety net that people can access wherever they are in the world, whether it's health insurance, retirement, income protection, maternity and paternity leave, available to everyone everywhere. So imagine having something like the Norwegian safety net, which is the best out there, but you can have access from any country in the world, whether it's Angola or Albania. You're able to have that. We actually partner with Lano. So when you are on their platform, the benefits that you'll receive will be SafetyWing. And yeah, we'll be happy to take any questions when it comes to benefits.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lana. And with that note, also a partner of ours, indeed, the 3 speakers are companies that are partnering with Lano. So that makes it very special for me. And the last but not least, Kurt, if you don't mind saying hello and introducing yourself.
Sure. Thank you so much, Andrea, and a very, very warm welcome from Switzerland, where I'm based. My name is Kurt von Moos. I'm a director at Go Global, where I oversee our central operations and our compliance for the entire EMEA region. Go Global, as Andrea mentioned, is an EOR provider, an international employer of record. So essentially what that means is we enable international companies to engage local talent in almost every country in the world. And we do this through our own local entities. Go Global started just 3 short years ago. It certainly feels like a lot longer than that, but we recently had our anniversary. And in taking stock of where we're at currently, I can very proudly share with you that we're now live and directly in just over 50 countries, and we serve nearly 100 countries worldwide in Asia Pacific, the Americas, and EMEA. So absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you so much, Andrea, for the invitation, and as I said, big warm welcome from Switzerland.
Absolutely amazing growth, and yeah, success story that we also feel part of as partners. Okay, so thank you so much for that. I'm gonna, to make sure that everyone's starting off engaged, we're gonna put on the first poll question, which you should see on your screen now. And the question is, which global benefit is the most important to you? You have options like health insurance, stock options, wellness. We're going to be talking about some of these today, flexibility, or others. You can just comment on the chat if you feel like some of these are missing. Only 50% have voted, so please go ahead and put your vote in there. Perfect. 70% have voted. I can already see clear numbers here. Fantastic. Okay. Awesome. So I think everyone should have had time already to vote. And I see 90% have voted. So I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. Perfect. And actually, the results are in, and it's not surprising. Okay, I'm going to actually let the speakers guess which one was the most voted in your, what do you think? Any guess there?
I would probably say health insurance.
So surprisingly for me, health insurance came second. The first one is flexibility. So remote work, workation, unlimited holidays, that was number one. It was voted 64%, and health insurance was voted 30%. And the remaining were stock options 5%, 5% wellness. And I don't think anyone included anything on the chat. So yeah, flexibility, remote work. I don't see, yeah, more and more companies are offering this, and definitely for us, it's a given, but a lot of companies out there still don't have that. So we now have a sense of what are some of the most important benefits our audience have. And let's kick it off with some questions for the panel, right? So, you know, one of the key topics when talking about benefits globally is compliance, of course, because every jurisdiction, every country has its own local laws. And with things like insurance or even going more broadly, EOR, where you cover the whole employment piece, these can lead to very kind of complex situations. So I wanted to address this question to Kurt, but of course, feel free to kind of jump in as you see fit. Is how have you approached, from the perspective of Go Global, the challenges of gaining access to and kind of building a competitive global benefits program that is both locally relevant and compliant, and offering this to clients?
Sure, that's a really good question. And to be honest with you, that it was a huge challenge for us. So you know, where we started was really trying to identify what we were trying to achieve globally. It's a small step, but really important. And what we realized was we have two main goals at Go Global. The first, obviously, is being compliant, right? So as the legal employer, we have an obligation to provide a whole host of statutory benefits to all our employees and our managed workforce. And of course, the second thing is we realized a lot of our customers are dealing with things like the talent shortage, right? Or they have very, very strategic plans in place to retain talent or as part of the recruiting strategy. So there was a whole host of non-statutory benefits that came on top of that. So for us, I guess the challenge, you could say, was to reconcile those two things. And when we start, going into any new territory or jurisdiction, it always begins with that local assessment. So we try and first understand from a legal perspective what the statutory obligations are. Then we do a whole host of benchmarking and testing to understand what does the local workforce want, really. And what we found time and time again is oftentimes what the employees want and what the employers think employees want are a little bit different. So a great example for that is Switzerland, right? So I'm based in Switzerland. I use this example a little bit disingenuously because I'm based here and I know it very well. But a lot of our clients, when they approach me, they say that one of the first questions they ask is, we've got a guy that's pretty senior, or we have a lady that we'd like to place in a very, very senior role, and we want to offer a really good premium pension. How can you help us with that? Well, in Switzerland, the pension packages are actually statutory and they're deeply embedded in the social security system. So most employees here, they'll have the same premium pension package that's part of their social security, and they'll take that from employer to employer. So the concept of having a private company that provides your premium insurance doesn't really exist, and it doesn't really translate to a Swiss employee. So oftentimes our job is to understand those local differences and help the client navigate, and then really help them make sense of that and implement it into their global benefit strategy. So we start locally. We get that sense of what people need, what people must have, and then we deploy it. Now the deployment process is pretty difficult because for a lot of these benefits, you need to have a local entity to gain access to them. You need things like local banking facilities to be able to pay into them, right? So we need to make sure all of that is designed around that initial benefits offering. And then we need to create the communication both for our internal teams so they understand how to run those processes, but also for our clients so they understand how to communicate that to their employees and how to make sense of it. Once that's done, I would say that it's an ongoing process where things change annually, different laws come into place, and also the trends in the marketplace change. If you had asked me a couple of years ago and today, what people want in terms of benefits has evolved quite substantially, and I'm actually, thinking about it, not really surprised about the flexibility at work. Go Global is entirely remote, so I often take it for granted and forget my past life when I used to commute, right? But yeah, they evolve. So it's our job to kind of stay on top of those trends and help our customers and guide them through that evolution.
Yeah, I see education as being a big part of it. And I'm curious, Lana, from your perspective, given, you stand in the insurance industry, what is for you or in your perspective, benefits that are both locally relevant and globally competitive? Because we were talking about locally relevant. You were mentioning that, Kurt.
Sure. I think also I want to go back to recognizing what the audience kind of like voted. I think that's great. I do a presentation like that. What are the top 10 benefits that you should give to your employees and contractors? And actually the number one I mentioned is flexibility. Because we are a remote first culture and remote first company, we have an amazing culture that basically we have 100% retention because we give this flexibility. We give this way of being a nomad to everyone, and you can work from anywhere and anytime, versus saying like, oh yeah, it's remote, but you can also only work from home versus having to travel. We are working towards a more borderless world. So like when Kurt was starting to talk, it's almost like I lost him because there's so much, like legal jargon and, compliance things that actually scare a lot of people ops, head of HR, CEOs that want to go global, but then they're like, oh my God, all of this complexity when it comes to local regulation. And I hope that one day we don't have to go down this like rabbit hole that we have to figure out right now to be able to live a life that we want to live. I hope that governments get together and they make it easier for people to live a life that's borderless, and that's what we strive at SafetyWing. But to answer your question in terms of what do we see in the market, we see a lot of people that come to us and say, hey, I really need some kind of health insurance because my head of technology just left because he accepted a job at Google, and Google gives really great health benefits. And we have zero health benefits. Like, we are a distributed company. We have 10 people in different places, and we just don't know how to do this in an easy way. And that's where we come in. We say you can just have one plan, one dashboard, add and remove people wherever they are. We serve 180 countries. So this makes it pretty easy to give something that's equal across the board to everybody that joins from whatever country. So that's what we're seeing, is like, how can you get these benefits to keep and attract the best talent?
So equitable plus relevant, locally relevant, but equitable across the board. Yeah, makes sense. So with that being said, I'd love to hear Eva's perspective around, in this borderless world, remote working, we're doing more home office. In your perspective, why is it important to have a benefit like mental health, which I'm surprised didn't come up more? Higher rated in the poll, but I'm sure a lot of people agree it's top priority.
Yes, so I think what is very important to look at when we look at mental health is that it's a very universal phenomenon. So it exists all over the world. Every person has mental health, and in every part of the world, we also have mental health problems and issues. And in every part of the world, we also have psychologists, counselors, therapists to help. And I think this is important to keep in mind, that the actual challenge is to bring these two together. So I'd say, like, before COVID, we often had quite a local situation that whenever you had like a mental health issue, you had to go to like some local psychologist or counselor and find someone and like get an appointment. And it was like super tricky. Sometimes health insurance also came into play there, where it might have been limited and not be reimbursed by your statutory health insurance, for example. So what we see is that right now the employers actually discover there's a huge potential there to support their employees, and not only because this is just a nice to have and a benefit, but because it's a fundamental, because everybody has mental health. And also when we look at the Great Resignation right now, many employees also say, okay, I want to go to a workplace that supports me in my mental well-being, and especially if we go and look at remote teams, because access to mental health is sometimes so hard to get that the companies can really take a lot of responsibility and also like lower the threshold of actually getting access in a very easy way. And we all know by now how it is to work online, how it is to do things online that we never would have imagined to do online before. And I think this is crucial that employers actually see the potential that they have in supporting employees with their mental health, because it's so universal to everyone all over the world, no matter at which country you look at.
Yeah, totally agree there, Eva. Thanks for sharing that perspective. I think I'm seeing a lot of the terms kind of move along the same lines, even though you guys are three in different benefits or different aspects of the benefits. But I do see how technology has impacted a lot in what you're doing, right? Like I'm thinking, Eva, Nilo Health wouldn't be possible some years ago. Like same for Lana, right? Like how technology has bridged the gap in terms of giving you that access borderless globally, but also with obviously the constraints that Kurt mentioned at the beginning. So in your opinion, Eva, how has technology impacted the distribution and the offering a benefit like mental health wellness?
Yeah, you just mentioned it's bridging the gap, and I think that's what pretty much sums it up, that it is an opportunity to lower the threshold and actually bridging the gap between like, okay, I have a problem now and I do not want to become more severe with this. So technology is like the easiest way and the fastest way to actually get someone to support you. And this is also what we do at Nilo Health. So you just do like 2 or 3 clicks and you have your like mental health support you can have it on the next day actually. And before COVID, we like had to look at phone numbers and like calling people and like I don't know, waiting for a response. So the whole process is like so long, and there's like such a high threshold actually for getting support. And this is what has definitely changed, and where technology can really counteract this the time that is like lapsing to get support right away if you have an issue.
So the way you guys are locally relevant is through, for example, languages. You can offer the therapy in any language. So if the person, and obviously remotely from your phone.
Yes, that's a big issue as well. So when we look at global teams, of course, it's much easier to express yourself in your first language than like having to communicate in English, especially when it comes to maybe also very emotional topics. So what we can offer at Nilo, and what is super important in remote teams, is that you can always have support in your first language accessible in a very easy way. So this is also, I think, lowering the threshold again to get support if you have somebody in your first language.
Yeah, understood. So going back to an earlier topic that we touched, which was around compliance and how there are mandatory benefits versus non-mandatory benefits. I think you described it that way, Kurt. I'm thinking mental wellness is not mandatory yet. Maybe it will become in the future, but I'm curious what benefits, from an EOR perspective, what benefits can and cannot be provided, right? If you do that distinction of mandatory, non-mandatory, and how do you support clients in that process, right? So curious if you can give us some examples.
Before I answer your question, I just want to touch on the issue of mental health, because it's actually very interesting. We're seeing mental health starting to become included in a lot of the statutory coverages. So a great example of this is in France. In France, we have a medical provider that's specifically in place for occupational coverage, right? And as part of that occupational coverage is the notion of burnout or mental stress. So our employees actually have the ability to contact this health provider, which could put them in touch with local mental health specialists. We don't see this in every country, but we are starting to see it pop up. To be honest with you, I'd like to see it go a little bit faster, but we can certainly see the trend at least pointing in the right direction.
That's amazing. Yeah,
it's really
just
good.
one piece I'd like to add there around equitable benefits that Lana was mentioning before. There's also like a strong cultural element, right? So if in country mental health is not something that is culturally, as widespread and is perhaps a taboo in some cultures, perhaps that's something that will take a bit of a longer way. There's other, so kind of bringing it back to the whole topic of what is locally relevant versus globally demanded, and so on and so forth. But really interesting point. Yeah, and please, Kurt, if we were going to go back to the original question, which was like around what can be offered and what cannot.
Sure. So, I mean, the short answer to that is most things can be offered. It just kind of depends on the type of benefits we're talking about. So, things like better contractual terms, like additional paid leave, or things like flexible work conditions, are pretty straightforward for us to implement. The challenge is in linking it always back to the local compliance, right? So, if we take work flexibility as an example. One of the popular things that we see a lot is unlimited paid leave. Go Global offers that internally to our workers. We see a lot of clients that are offering that. And of course, remote working, work from anywhere, be a digital nomad. But with that comes two challenges on the operational side for an ER provider like ourselves. The first one is when you consider someone who's moving around. On work contracts, we always have a work location, right? And generally, the occupational health insurances or the coverage that's associated to that employee will cover that worker in that location. So a big question arises when a worker is moving around constantly. How will that play out if the worker has an accident, right? How long can the worker be abroad? There's also tax implications as well. So if I were, for example, to go visit my wife's family, which I'm doing in August, right? The question arises: how long can I stay in the UK before I might be liable for Social Security payments in the United Kingdom, right? So these are all things that we need to assess, and unfortunately, the answer is going to change depending on the country of origin and the destination country. So it becomes quite complex, right? And oftentimes our clients are looking for kind of like a magic bullet answer, but the reality is you kind of have to assess it on a case-per-case basis because of all the different variables. Another big compliance issue that we see, and this is pretty specific to us as an EOR provider, is that because we're the legal employer, we have to be essentially the source of that benefit, right? So what we want to avoid for our customers is creating a whole host of compliance risks, like co-employment, for example. So depending on the benefit, or depending on the situation, sometimes we have customers who ask us to loop in the EOR workers into their existing plans, but of course, we have to vet that to ensure that that coverage would apply to them, because technically they're not the legal employees of that end client. It wouldn't come under that coverage. So again, it's really this case-per-case assessment where our job is to essentially make this process simple for our clients so they don't have to do it. So what we ask is that they are very transparent with us. They communicate what their strategy is, their plans. And our job is to kind of pick all those things up that they're not necessarily going to be thinking of and help them navigate through those things.
This actually segues very well to a question that I wanted to address to Lana. It definitely does not sound simple, what you're describing. And I know you're trying to add simplicity and educate the clients and so on and so forth. But I guess it's one thing, right, to want to allow folks to work from anywhere. But I think the real challenge is how do you actually deliver on those things, right, and comply with the laws. And in your experience, Lana, like what systems are companies using to provide and actually pay those benefits to employees, consultants around the world? Like what's your experience there?
Sure. So they can use platforms like Lano, for example, where let's say it's an individual contractor that wants to buy the benefit for himself. They can just click, get that insurance plan, and then they can use the insurance locally by being able to go to any doctor, whether it's private or public, and then we would reimburse them on a basically every time that they go to a doctor, whether it's dental, vision, maternity, whatever they'd like. We do see cases where companies will buy it for their employees and contractors. And basically, it's like a duty of care almost to get something like that. We haven't seen, I guess, anyone get in trouble, let's say in Europe, for doing something like this. But again, I wouldn't like sit here and recommend, because I'm not a lawyer, and then you can get into like some deep waters.
A bit different to what Kurt said, right? Kurt was like, we wouldn't recommend the end client to take the insurance on their own, but if there's a way of justifying it differently. I've also heard a number of opinions in this aspect. So I don't know, Kurt, if you want to further comment, but I know there's some EORs that take a very strict stance on this.
Yeah, I mean, I would clarify, it really depends on the type of insurance we're talking about. I mean, it depends on the type of coverage, right? So you have coverage plans that are linked to a company and that covers their associated employees. And then you have individual plans that can be taken out for an individual, right? And that's two very, very different circumstances. What I was referring to previously was more a case of where clients might have, a global policy with a provider for X benefit, and then they're thinking that because they're employing a worker through us, that would qualify that worker as their employee and therefore come under that contract. And that's where we have the compliance issue that we kind of have to vet. So again, it's very much a case-per-case basis. And I think, like Lana, I would be remiss to give you a general recommendation, because the reality is you have to look at the fine print, right? Right.
Okay. Let's not bore our audience with or getting too technical, too compliance driven. Let's try to go back. But to do that, I'm actually going to throw the second poll. So make sure that our audience is still there. I'm going to go ahead and launch the second poll, which says, does the benefits package matter when you decide on a job? So you can answer this from a kind of candidate perspective, or if you're a hiring manager, like, do you think that this benefits package would make the needle turn on your potential candidate? So very easy, yes or no, or maybe. And that was pretty easy. I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. So 87% of people said yes, and 9% said no. So some people don't really care about benefits, and 5% maybe. So I'm not sure what maybe is, but I guess it would depend on the whole package. And I guess I'd like to ask another question to Eva. In general about, how easy do you think it's for companies to put in place a benefit like mental health and mental wellness, right? Given that a lot of people think that benefits packages do matter when a candidate has to decide on a job, how easy do you think it is nowadays to offer this benefit, and what ways do companies actually do it in your experience that you've seen in the market?
Yeah, so I think one of the most common things today is, of course, to have some cooperation with some external provider, because mental health is such a sensitive topic, and some companies have like in-house help, but often what happens is that employees then say, I do not really know if this is really confidential, really a safe space for me here. So what I see very often is that companies say, okay, we get a provider for this, an external provider, so that we can really ensure this is a safe space for our employees and that no sensitive data is being shared. And when this is the case, of course, you have to promote it in your company, because people to some degree have to learn there is a benefit at that time point. And I think this is also important when it comes to mental health, that you always try to increase awareness for this. So it's becoming more and more of an issue in companies, and people say, okay, we want to take a look at this and we want to put more awareness on this, but you need to re-communicate this over and over and over again. Even if you think, okay, we've had that package for, I don't know, 6 months now, but you have to recommunicate this over and over again, because not every person will use it right away when you implement a new service, for example. So it might take like 2 or 3 months until somebody says, okay, now I have a thing I really want to get a professional for. So staying consistent with this and like recommunicating this all over and over is super essential when it comes to mental well-being. And also what I really want to stress here is for companies in general, I think it's important to understand that mental health is not just some like fluffy thing or a nice thing to do. We are losing 12 billion working days each year to mental health issues because of mental health issues. And I really want companies to understand that this is not just something to do, it's an actually economic case. And this is important to understand, that whatever cost this may produce at first sight is actually something that you save on another side. So the return on invest is around about 1 to 4. There are different studies on this, but it's around about $1 to $4 dollars. So this is really important to understand. It will really pay off, and it's really an economic case here.
Huge impact for businesses that adopt these types of measures. In fact, I wanted to share with the audience the experience of Lano. So earlier this year, we decided, because of the war with Russia, we had a lot of employees that were very suffering a lot. And we saw a lot of people, experiencing a lot of stress. And you know, as a result of COVID, we've also seen that across the last 2 years, it's been really tough for a lot of people to shift into this forced remote work. And what we decided is to implement Nilo Health for all our employees, and we really think it has been a huge success. And I agree with you that it needs a kind of education. Some people are more reticent initially to use it. Others, you know, need to understand a bit better. Then colleagues start to share their experience. It becomes a more open, an open dialogue about, hey, actually I used it. It was great. I've booked another session. It was so easy to use. I feel better after using it. And it's so important to create that culture for, you know, openness and not being afraid of expressing you know, that people are experiencing, given the climate that we have around and the news. It's difficult for people to focus. And then, of course, you have the forced remote work, which has also, I imagine, been a huge increase for businesses to consider using a tool like yours.
Absolutely. And what I really like is that you also underscored the cultural effect that this had on Lano. Because this is something that I very often see. So as soon as you get the topic going somehow, people also it's more easy for people to actually open up, and it has super nice cultural effects on the whole company level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, remote culture, another huge topic that I don't think we'll be able to cover today, but yeah, I mean, I guess Lana and Kurt, open question for you guys, like in your experiences or even within your companies, do you see anything like a benefit like this being offered or potentially being offered? Are you thinking about it, Lana, given that you're in the health space? Is it something that Safety Wing potentially might be going into as well? How do you see it?
Yeah, we get asked all the time, actually, if mental health is covered. And under the policy, I think you get like 10 therapy sessions a year, I believe. It really depends, but it's interesting. I want to check out maybe Milo Health and see if that would help our employees and contractors. But it's nice to hear that you guys saw a big difference in your team.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. What about you, Kurt? Any clients asking for this? What's your... Oh, I think you're muted. I thought it was connection.
Sorry about that.
But...
I've got kids in the background, so I have to make sure I'm muted at all times for safety purposes, right? No, we certainly do get clients who ask about mental health and the coverage. To be honest with you, I think a lot of the questions we get are mainly in terms of what the statutory covers and how they can complement that, because I think clients are trying to understand outside of their home countries, you know, where the gaps are. Certainly for us internally at Go Global, mental health is actually a really big topic that's come up. I mean, we have a great culture internally, and what we've realized is, I think we're lucky because our team is relatively small, so we have a bit of a family vibe. So it's very open communication, and through that we realize, wow, the culture is already here. What's missing is the tools. So our HR department right now is currently working on a much more improved mental health program. And I'd actually love to get your details, Eva, because based on what you've been saying today, I'd be very, very curious to speak to you a bit more about it.
Happy to share our experience as a way to influence other companies. And now I wanted to launch like an open question to anyone who wants to answer, or all of you. What other benefits do you think, besides the ones that you're working with, what other benefit do you think is going to be the next big hot topic? So mental health is definitely one. What do you think is kind of the next big thing? And I think remote work was 2020 after the pandemic, and it still is. But what do you think is kind of the next big thing in terms of global benefits? Any forecast here?
I can chime in because I talk about this all the time. Some of the benefits that I'd like to mention, I think, yes, minimum vacation days should be a must, because a lot of companies have this unlimited vacation days, and that kind of puts pressure on the person taking them.
Or
so
people don't take them.
Yes, so it shouldn't be just an unlimited PTO. It should be a minimum vacation day. So at Safety Wing, we have 20 days minimum that we have to take everywhere around the world versus just unlimited. And what happens is that the founders also take those vacations. So they take at least a week, a quarter. They are off of Slack, off of email, off of everything. They do not communicate with us. So that sends an amazing signal to all of your team members that it's okay to take time off. And if I'm taking time off, it's okay that you do the same. I saw when I was in Silicon Valley, I saw that many companies like Uber and Airbnb and all the big companies like Google would offer this unlimited vacation days or PTO, and then no one would take any. So there would be a lot of people burnt out all over. So I think this is kind of like a must that we have to discuss. But in terms of what's next, I think that paid team gatherings in cool destinations should definitely be a good kind of like way to entice your team members to attract and retain talent, because as we are going more remote, and a lot of us are remote first, we need those in-person interactions. And actually, if you make them 1 week a quarter in a cool destination, they're so much more effective. And because you're saving so much in office space, it's actually quite possible to do this in many different places. So take Safety Wing, we do one team gathering a quarter. The last 3 ones have been in Slovenia, Costa Rica, Mexico, and the next one coming up is in Bali. So these are a very cool way to kind of like connect with your kind of like team members and really get an opportunity to build rapport, to co-work together, but not necessarily having to be together all the time, but just like a week, a quarter, potentially.
Amazing destinations. Definitely, I think all of us would agree there. It's funny that you mentioned in-person gatherings, because I conducted a webinar like a year ago, and one of the guest speakers is the CEO and founder of a company called Klaus App. And he was asked about what was the secret sauce for remote culture and to get a good remote culture. And he actually said meeting in person from time to time. So this exact thing you mentioned, he was like, we do gatherings, maybe not in such exotic places, I don't think he mentioned, but he said that it was the secret to success, right? Being able to regularly people knowing that they're going to meet in person to also form those relationships. And the question I have around, you mentioned, how do you make a reality this the unlimited holidays, or minimum holidays that you were saying would be a better suggestion? How do you actually make that a reality? You mentioned one technique, which is the founders taking away also the vacation in order to kind of bring that into the culture as well. But I guess my question would be for Kurt, for example, given that you're working with a lot of clients that use EOR and are remote first, how do these clients, do you think, navigate if you've got a big group of people, they're all in different locations, and I guess, Lana, you can also answer because your company is also remote first, is like, how do you navigate if people are off at different times? Like if they're taking local holidays, you know, everyone's in different locations. What are some of the best practices for that when you're offering a benefit like take your local holidays because they're statutorily required, but also take a minimum of days?
Yeah. So I think what we're seeing is that a lot of workplaces are becoming more goal-oriented, right? And kind of moving away from this, punch in, punch out, 8 to 5 mentality. A great example I can give you at Go Global is we actually have a lot of parents that work for us, and partly one of the big reasons why we've attracted so many parents is because of our flexibility and how kind of liberal we are with our time slots. And that really makes it ideal for parents. So, I jokingly told a colleague the other day, since I've been at Go Global, I've been able to take my kids to the bus stop every single day. And I was never able to do that prior to working at Go Global. So it's a silly little thing, but I can't tell you how much it means to me to wave my daughter off every day at school. So, I think as technology kind of takes over and we have better options, we're seeing lots of shifts, like, for example, I am culture, right? When I send an instant message over Teams to a colleague, I don't know what time zone this person is in. I don't know if that person is also at the bus dropping off their kids. So there isn't an expectation that I'm starting a live conversation with someone, right? But there is a implicit trust that everyone is kind of on the same page. Everyone is working to the same goals. So I don't need to know when that person is going to be online, but I do need to trust and know that person is working to the same goals as me, and I'm going to get an answer when they can get me that answer. And I think we're seeing slowly this shift. I think it'll take time. I think it's a work in progress for a lot of certainly our customers we can see, but that's the direction I see it going in.
Beautiful, beautiful, and great example. It's really nice to hear. I'm actually going to use this moment. I'm looking down because I have another screen here, and I'm getting questions and comments from people. So Anna Weber said, relocation support is also a very valuable benefit. Even in remote first companies, people might wish to switch their base to another country. And in terms of some of the kind of what's the future of benefits, our commercial director here at Lano, Sergi, actually put one that I really like: early salaries, early access to wages. This is a huge one. A lot of companies popping up in this space. So yeah, what do you guys think? Do you think this is like something that will kind of be offered as a benefit to companies? I've seen even in the EOR space, this is something that some companies are considering, and payroll companies as well.
It seems pretty easy to do. I mean, you just pay a bit earlier, right?
Yeah, it's earned wage access, so it's pay as you go. I think it has to be connected to your payroll, so that's kind of the complexity part, right? That, and maybe Kurt knows because they work with a lot of payroll providers in all the countries where they're operating, and I think it has to be connected with the payroll because essentially it's like they're advancing you the salary, so you're earning it as you go.
Correct. So it does need to be connected to the payroll. So I think there's two challenges, right? One on the operational side, how companies transition to being able to facilitate that. And then on the compliance side, I mean, you have to remember a lot of the laws that I deal with on a daily basis in the EOR space are kind of outdated laws, and they haven't really caught up to concepts like remote working, concepts like EOR and flexible workspaces. So, in some countries, we still have these old payroll systems where, taxes are calculated on thresholds and it needs to be calculated on a monthly basis. So there are these challenges that we need to wade through. But given the importance of it, and given the demand, it's coming. It's just going to take time.
Yeah, absolutely. Another benefit. Oh, sorry, Lana,
no, quick question,
go
Andrea. Is it like, let's say you make $50,000 a year? I'm just doing an average, and then your employer gives you 40,000 in January, and then you have to earn the rest, or?
I think it's more like as you go in the month. So let's say, for example, that your pay is biweekly or once a month, like it would be in most European countries. it's the 5th of the month, and in exchange for a small fee, you get access to the wage on the 5th of the month. Because essentially what we're giving employers is a loan without interest, because we work all over the month. And so if you think about it in those terms, it's actually a loan that we're giving employers. But yeah, that's how it would work. I think Uber, for example, has been a company that has implemented this measure for all its Uber drivers in-house. But then there's a lot of companies that are offering this for companies to connect via their payroll, and they essentially do kind of a loan. So that's how it would work. Typically for people that are working in retail or in those types of industries, gastronomy, for example, it's quite relevant. I want to also highlight another comment from Jasleen in our audience. She mentioned that another benefit that can be offered is home office setup allowance. That includes things like telephone, internet charges. Employees are likely to incur additional work from home related expenditures such as internet charges, rent, electricity, furniture, etc. And therefore employers can provide allowances to meet these expenditures. And I'm sure Kurt has something to say here, because this is actually mandatory, is now slowly becoming mandatory in many countries like Portugal recently, Spain, Belgium, where you actually do need to give a work from home stipend. How are you seeing this? This is something that has come from the pandemic, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's come into the limelight because of the pandemic, but in actual fact, this has always been here, right? Because at a fundamental level, from a legal perspective, the employer is responsible for contributing to any costs that a worker has, be it in the office, outside the office, or at home, right? So I think the pandemic really highlighted it. Like you said, in countries like Spain, France, even Switzerland, we do have this in the law, and they're actually very specific to home working. I think one of the challenges is the laws sometimes can be a little bit unclear. So, they'll tell you you have to pay a stipend, but they won't really give you any guidance on how much you're supposed to pay. So, that's where we spend a lot of our time, is kind of guiding our customers through that process on how to figure it out and the different things to consider.
Yeah. Amazing. So we have 7 minutes left. So I would like to open up the webinar to questions. If there are no questions, hopefully we'll put throw in one more additional questions, but I would love to see if people are asking. Oh, we actually have a question from Paul that says, what about benefits for contractors, freelancers? Nice topic. Whoever wants to jump on this one, what are you seeing out there?
I can jump on here. We are working with a lot of platforms like Upwork, Fiverr, a lot of freelance. Obviously, yeah, where you can be a freelancer and you can get paid through those platforms. You're able to also access benefits through them. So you're able to get at least health insurance from some of these platforms. Actually, SafetyWing was started because one of the founders had a freelancing platform before Superside, and he saw how difficult it was for freelancers to get their health insurance. That's why we put this company together to really help contractors and freelancers. So yes, it is a bit more difficult to do that on your own. And that's a problem that we're solving, and that's why we're partnering with the different freelancing platforms to offer you health insurance. But if you do want that through a certain platform, maybe let us know, and then we can ask them to see if they can turn that on for you.
Yeah. One thing I'd like to add on that one is sometimes it's not straightforward, right, to offer benefits to freelancers, especially in countries that are high risk, such as Germany, where there's a lot of laws and statutory requirements to what is an actual freelancer. And sometimes companies come to us to ask us like, hey, with offering them a health insurance or, bringing them vacation or telling them, giving them the same kind of benefits as I would give to a normal employee or a full-time employee, would that be considered misclassifying the employee? So sometimes we get those sorts of questions. I will say the audience always asks, what are the high-risk countries? There's not a straightforward answer here. There's definitely countries that have a lot of regulation, and we always recommend to be careful and look at what the law says. But yeah, that's one caveat that I just wanted to highlight. Anything from your end, Eva or Kurt, that you'd like to highlight? I don't know, Eva, is Nilo Health available, for example, for freelancers?
And no, for now, not, because we are a B2B company right now, so we were just working with other companies. However, I was having the exact same thought like you, because I'm working in Germany, and my head was just immediately like putting on the alarm, like, oh, I don't know about the legal side of this, at least in Germany. Because yeah, there are very strict regulations about when you are a freelancer, when you are an employee. So this is something you would definitely need to clarify. Right now, we're not available for freelancers, but there are other mental health companies, B2C companies, where you can actually get mental health support, online mental health support. So there are other companies that take care of that.
Awesome.
I fully second. Yeah, I just want to say I fully second you. As the conversation was going, I was also thinking of Germany as well. Yes, there is a host of high risk countries. I think what's interesting though is that there's actually a host of countries that are very contractor friendly. So we see places like, for example, Poland and Romania, who are actually desperate to attract contractors specifically in the IT industry. And there, it's actually the opposite, where we see a whole host of flexibility, a whole host of tax incentives. So again, I think it really depends on the location, and you have to case per case. There isn't a magic bullet answer, unfortunately, for contractors.
Exactly. Well, with this, we have 4 minutes to go. So I think we're going to give the opportunity to the audience to just ask the final question. And if not, I will say thank you to the panelists today, because I think this was a very interesting conversation. Your perspectives are extremely valuable. I think that you kind of collided onto the same topics, and I hope you enjoyed it. And to everyone in the audience, thank you so much for coming today and joining this webinar. There was a lot of information exchanged, and if you want any follow-up from the panelists, please reach out to Raquel or to myself on LinkedIn, or any of the panelists on LinkedIn. I'm sure they'll be happy to chat with you. And the email that we have in place for any questions is gotowebinar@lano.io. Thank you so much, and I hope you enjoyed it. And thanks again to the speakers, and see you next time.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.